creative people are the kids that didn't grow up. I let my passion take over my decision making. By the way, in your lifetime, whoever makes the best battery is going to win. This was back in 1998. How old are you? Oh, I'm 19. And they said, you need to calm the fuck down. You're a car guy, right? What would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? And that was when I pretended that Chevy made an electric sports car that didn't exist. Like, we went to the fucking moon. Can I just be honest with you? I'm going to tell you what is cool. You are not going to tell me what is cool.
1, 2, 3, 4.
He's no one, she's no one, we're no one.
September 6th, 2024. We're sitting here with Matt Teske, local legend, Portland native, and the founder of a electric vehicle company that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But I don't think that's the most interesting part about Matt Teske.
Oh.
There's more to your story
Okay.
meets the mine. So we'll see how we go today. And again, welcome to the CoPro podcast. This is where creativity and collaboration converge. We do deep dives into brands, innovations, athletes, and just the inner workings of storytelling. So today we're going to get with Matt, and I want to start up with an icebreaker.
Oh, you brought me a gift?
I brought you a gift, but I
Oh.
kind of kept it super ghetto so we could open it and not make a lot of noise. But if for
Okay.
the folks in the drive-in today, it's like Matt's opening up a small box, and in the box,
How loud is this tape going to be?
I'm sure it's loud. But
Dude,
oh, what do we have? Can you describe what you're looking at, Matt?
this is, okay, well, Ertl makes the best stuff when it comes to toys and aerospace and space and planes. And this is the space shuttle with the booster rockets and the launch pad. This is killer. Where did you find this?
I have my resources.
Okay.
I have fixers.
Dude, I had this as a kid. Like, literally had this as a kid.
Toss the box and just point at the camera so they can get a close shot
Yeah,
on
this-
it. But
this is-
we're looking at the 70s space shuttle looking toy.
This
Not
is
Fisher
so...
Price, but just something.
Well, and again, the way when you're a kid, I mean, you live through your imagination, and the first thing you gravitate to is anything tactile that helps you pretend that it's real, right? And so for me, it was always, I wanted to be a pilot when I was a kid, and I loved space and aerospace, and I grew up in the desert in California where we got to see stuff flying around all the time, and we saw the space shuttle land and things like that. So, this is nostalgia like on fire. This is awesome, dude.
But it's also sort of those beginnings too. And again, I think we all have our roots in creativity as kids. And
Yeah.
again, I think the good ones never grow up and they stay youthful for their whole career, and that sort of helps creativity grow. And again, I can just imagine this, 8, 9, 10-year-old Matt Teske running around with a space shuttle in his house and pretending, to go to Mars.
Yeah. It was, my brother and I are two very different people for how we're wired. And he was one of the first people that told me, he's like, yeah, you're like one of those, he's like, creative people are the kids that didn't grow up, right? He's like, you personify that to me. And we've talked about that kind of stuff. And he just said, yeah, he's like, the way that you kind of always found yourself being very confident around things that you fell in love with, and then how you would just say, I want to be that. So when I was a little kid, I told my mom, I want to be SR-71 man. And she said, what's that? I said, I don't know. I love the SR-71, and I can't be a pilot right now, so can I just be SR-71 man? So she literally made me a cape, and I was like SR-71 man for Halloween, and I would just wear it all the time. So, I mean, that's just, that was a big part of it. So, yeah, this totally speaks to my, the foundation of how I thought and kind of how I still do think, I guess.
And you didn't have to take the costume off today when you were on stage here. But
I could have brought it. I think the cape is probably would be go like mid back or something. To be perfectly honest, I think she's got it hidden somewhere, and she's like, it's a cherished thing for her too. So,
right.
Yeah.
But again, there it goes again, looking to the future, and again, what will this kind of manifest from this kid to where we'll kind of go with our conversation today as well. Yeah. The other part too that I thought was very interesting. Again, let's move the timeline forward a little quicker. But there's like this one phase that I thought was really fun. And again, for everybody at home, there's a picture of Matt in this magazine article.
Oh.
And, as a young man, you were tricking out Chevrolets. Is this what we're doing?
Yeah, well, it started, the first car I had, again, grew up in Southern California. And this is, mid-late 90s, coming of age, you get your license, things like that. And everybody had Hondas and Acuras. And it was, think Fast and Furious before Fast and Furious was Fast and Furious. And I was going to, street races and things like that. But I loved the aesthetic, the modifying of and creating it into your own visual representation of what you thought was cool. But I didn't want to start with the foundation that everyone else did. So they're all saying, oh, I got a Honda. And I was like, well, I want to be different. So I got a Chevy Cavalier, which all my buddies were like, why did you do that? And it led me to actually building a car that no one else had. And it led me to meeting people in the industry, including people from Chevy. And it led to opportunities like that to build custom cars alongside brands like GM at the beginning of my career. And it was, like, again, looking back, I'm like, I can't believe I was doing that. I was like in my early 20s. It's crazy.
But it's also another great story is you made some connections there.
Yeah.
Right. And so again, it's like, here's a young guy who has a vision of what everybody else is doing, pivots the other way, does something unique, and then gets noticed for it.
Yeah. Well, it's just an idea of, I mean, everybody, especially in the world of customization, and there's a lot of ways to look at that. I mean, and how you represent what you're passionate about. And when in the automotive world, there's so many avenues by which you can do it. And I thought what was most interesting back, in the 90s, it was, again, young people building small cars that all the old school guys were building hot rods and V8s. They were like, these are cute. They're not going to be fast. They're not going to be cool ever. One of the goals I always had was I want to go to a show where everything shows up and have people walk by the car that I built and have these old school guys look at the car that I built, have them go, I got to be honest, I don't hate it.
Like I don't hate it.
I don't hate it. It's pretty cool. So that was always the thing that I got a kick out of. And I think part of the, working with a brand that was kind of not what everyone else was, like not an import brand, but like a domestic brand like Chevy, they hadn't really created their footprint in the youth world yet, for like the tuner world as we called it, growing up. And I was fortunate to start in it early, and I just kind of picked up on the idea that maybe I could be a little different while still being part of the mix, and it helped me stand out. And I had a flair for it, and but I also then learned how to network and meet the right people in the space and show them that I wasn't just doing it for me. I was doing it because it's like, wow, what else could we do that's bigger than even my ideas, right? So.
And tell me about some of those conversations you had with the execs at Chevy.
Well, some of them were, one time, again, I built my car. It was my privately owned car. And they were working on, again, trying to find their footing in how to represent their small cars to younger audiences that were competing with the same kind of excitement that other brands were seeing. Mm-hmm. And it finally got to a point where they said, hey, we'd like to just borrow your car. And so when I was in college, they actually took my car while I was, again, at school. My car was just parked at my house I grew up in. And they took it on a national tour.
No way.
And so I had friends that I had met through, online forums that would message me and email me back in the day and say, hey man, your car's in Atlanta. I was like, yeah, it's crazy, and but it spoke to the idea that, again, I wasn't savvy enough at the time from a business perspective, maybe to be like, oh, okay, like what can I get us? I was passionate. I was amazed that they thought that what I had done was so great that they would say, we wanted to represent not just you, but us. And I thought that was such a cool thing. And then it led to the opportunity to have bigger conversations around what could this be beyond my personal car and my ideas? How could I help them as even as a company to represent where they wanted to go? And I think that was, to me, that those conversations just were born out of, I let my passion take over my decision making, and it shined through in what I was doing, and it got the attention of people that I didn't even anticipate to talk to. But once I got the chance to, I understood, wow, this is a really cool opportunity to, again, establish a career, and maybe where can I take this? So
here are a couple things too. Again, it's like understanding and having a big vision. So I feel the precipice of an entrepreneur growing. Mm-hmm. I think the other one is, again, Chevy's got all the money in the world. Why didn't you take the money?
Yeah.
And again, you had a maturity to understand there was a bigger picture, and then have the inconvenience of not having your vehicle,
right?
Because you knew there would be a bigger reward.
It was, I wanted it to be bigger than where I had started, but I just didn't know how that would play out over time, right? And also, I mean, frankly, there's also just like lack of experience and naivete around what's going on right now. And I look back on some of those moments, and I've had conversations with, like I said, like my dad and my brother over the years, and they're like, yeah, like you didn't even have a sense that you shouldn't be doing that stuff. You were just kind of like, well, of course I can do this. And it just played out in such a way that, again, I think the authenticity around the fact that I cared about what I was doing was the people that I spoke with from a corporate level, they understood that. And that's when it just turned into, again, relationship building with the people that you meet through that process. And that's when you forge relationships and friendships with people that can also be good mentors. And I think that was one of the biggest things I did get out of that experience was I met so many people from the automotive world, whether it was automakers or even the aftermarket. And these are people that I'm still friends with today that were very instrumental in me understanding what I did and did not know.
It's something I'll say 1,000 times. I should make a T-shirt. It's a game of who you know.
Oh yeah.
Everything's a game of who you know. So don't be burning any bridges on the way up.
Yep.
Because there won't be any rungs as you come down.
Yeah.
Because you will get beaten hard as you climb up, and so that's good. But you also mentioned a couple things too. Again, one is like your dad feels like he was a big inspiration, motivation, and somebody that really kind of helped you through your travels. And then maybe you can tell me a little bit more.
Wow.
Again, what I'm showing here is a picture of Matt and his dad on a road trip, and I think there was a lot of inspiration on that road trip. Maybe you can share more of what you learned there.
That's a very important picture to me. It was the first time my dad and I had taken a road trip on our own, where I was, as an adult, and he happened to be going back to California for some stuff. I was already living here in Oregon, and I just said, hey, what if I just go with you, And what came, again, he and I talk all the time, but when you get to have moments like that where, you're confined in the car and all you've got is the passing scenery and conversation to kind of guide the process. So many things came out of that conversation. I remember on that road trip, it was in 2017. And I had just at the time thought to myself, I think I can kind of start pivoting where I want to take my passions a bit. And my dad's an engineer, and I always tell this story about my father. When I was a kid working on my car in high school, wrenching on it one time in the garage, and one time he walked out, and we were just chatting cars and talking about things. And he just happened to say, by the way, in your lifetime, whoever makes the best battery is going to win.
This is 2017.
This was back in 1998. And I remember rolling out from under the car, and I just looked at him. And again, in my brain, I'm going, battery. Like, the battery I have in my car runs the stereo I have. Like, that's a battery. And he's like, no, think bigger, And I remember talking to him about that on that road trip. I said, do you remember saying this to me? And he goes, yeah, it sounds like something I'd say. But I said, but do you remember? He goes, yeah. He goes, well, it's simple. It's just about, again, if you can build a battery that is energy dense, that can accept and release power in a really efficient way, you attach that to an electric motor, the auto industry changes forever.
Forever.
Yeah. And he just was, again, this is the mind of an engineer. And that's the thing that's so interesting is my father is an engineer and my mom is a teacher and an artist. And so I have this very weird blend of right brain, left brain. So I have a real appreciation for, the aesthetic and like making something, very cool. Whereas at the same time too, I think analytically in a way. I'm not near an engineer, but I understand and appreciate the process. And so it's always been very fun to have conversations with both of them over the years as I've, forged my path and career and the type of feedback I get from them on things. But that moment, when I was a kid with my dad and talking to him on that road trip, it was fun because that was kind of the beginnings of where my career path was pivoting. So.
Cool. Thanks, Dad.
No, yeah. No, I owe a lot to my dad on, again, never take that for granted. Like when you're a kid and your parents repeating something to you, it's because they care, and usually it's important.
It's true. But you also mentioned some other mentors, and this is a great time to give them a shout out. And then I'm sure that they kind of helped your trajectory as well. I'm super curious on how and what they contributed.
People that I met obviously through my career in the auto world. There was a gentleman by the name of Bob Kern. He was a GM for years. And he passed away again a couple of years ago, but he and I sat down and had a lot of conversations about kind of what he'd seen in his time at GM over the years. And he was one of those guys that kind of took me under his wing as I was young and growing in the process of working with them. He was instrumental in my understanding kind of how they operated, how the industry operated, how to maintain my passion without getting kind of like diluted and burnt out. He gave me some great insights over the years on that. And I really have to hand it to a lot of the professors I had. I went to Gonzaga University for college, and I still to this day talk to professors I again learned and went to school under, and unfortunately now I was very humbled, and it was gracious. They asked me to be a part of an advisory board at Gonzaga over the years, which I'm still a part of, and it's flattering to know that what I saw for myself, just my career path. These are people that also they taught you a lot. But I've forged relationships and friendships with these people. I mean, it went from me being a kid learning from them to being, just a colleague and a counterpart and a friend. And there's a lot of them. Shout out to Jim Helgeson and Peggy Sula-Raz and Dale Goodwin and others from over the years at Gonzaga that were phenomenal professors. And Dale just retired, actually. They just announced it the other day. So shout out to Dale.
Congrats, Dale.
Yeah.
That's a great... great insights too. And again, it's like hopefully, again, as people come up the ranks, you kind of combine two things. Again, you're getting a lot of education, A, through your family, B, just through the network of interest, and then really through institutions.
Yeah.
But also hearing is that it sounds like you also put a lot into when you're at Gonzaga. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of beer and keg parties too. But
Oh man,
you
yeah,
seem to get some value out of that.
yeah. I didn't really. I mean, as a kid, like I just didn't party much as a kid. I remember the first time I helped manage an automotive event. I was 19. It was the summer between my freshman and sophomore year of college, and I was at this event. It was in concert in partnership with GM. And it was just an enthusiast event out in Ohio. And I remember I was talking to one of the other people that was there, they were a car owner, and one of them finally said, they're like, can I ask you a question? Like, how old are you? And I said, oh, I'm 19. And they said, you need to calm the fuck down. I was like, oh, what does that mean? They're like, what are you doing being so like serious at 19, like doing all this stuff? I said, I don't know, I'm doing it differently. I'm just doing it how I do it, you know? And they just laughed because they were, you know, I don't know how much older they were than me at the time, but they just said, no, like, man, live a little, man. Like, I was like, I feel like I am, you know? So.
Aw.
Yeah.
You did it right. So again, in those also, again, it sounds like it's been the perfect trajectory for Matt. He did everything great.
Yeah.
I'm sure there was setbacks, and let's be honest, there's always life lessons in setbacks.
Yeah.
Can you share one of those?
I mean, I've always, one of the most interesting ones is, so one of the ventures I started years ago was actually when I was in college, was an action sports apparel line. And I wanted to get into that world. I myself, I mean, I snowboarded. I had a lot of passion for, being involved with those types of things. But I was never like the one who was great at it. But I just wanted to feel like, how can I contribute to this and also take part in other people's interests in creativity or athleticism or whatever that might be. So my brother was in a band. They were touring on Warped Tour. I was like, okay, well, what if I give you guys some shirts? And then also, I mean, I'm still snowboarding. I got friends that skate. Like, we could do something with this. And it turned into something that's kind of slowly started as I was getting out of school. And I put more time and attention to it back in 2003 and 2004. And it started to really get some traction going. And learned very quickly that there's so much that goes into making that possible. And we finally went out of our way to make a big splash at a trade show one year, and I invested every penny I had into making it happen, and it was the definition of did not work out. And I remember coming home and being like, okay, I'm broke. This didn't work out. We got some guys that were skating for us that were on flow, and I'm like, I'd love to sponsor you guys, but I mean, I gotta buy ramen. I don't know what's gonna happen. And it was a very humbling moment. And at the time, I thought, okay, well, you tail between your legs, like, what do you do, kind of thing. And I was always like, again, dabbling and had other interests. I was still doing all the car stuff, And so I figured I could pivot, but it was a moment of like, I have to acknowledge that this did not go as planned, and maybe I'm not cut out to be doing this. I have a passion for it, and I think it's a good creative outlet, but it may not be something that turns into a full-time business and grows monstrously as I might have envisioned. So, it's one of those things, I still dabbled with it for a few years, but then inevitably you just kind of have to let it go. I saw people that messaged me, and they're like, and the brand was called Exit.
There you go.
Yeah, it was my last name backwards. It was EKSET. And not terribly creative, I guess, but it was at least unique. But I have still got friends this day that message me like, you ever gonna print some more Exit gear, dude? Like, that was, and we had a ton of fun when we were doing it, man. Like, some of the photo shoots we did and some of the stuff we were producing and places we went, like the team that came together for it was a lot of fun. So.
Well, to say, I think that's where I got introduced to you. We had a creative director job at Nemo, and I really saw you as a designer. So again, I didn't understand too that you also had chops, let's call it on the dev side, and understanding, let's call it what the internet was going to be at that time. And I still remember having that lunch conversation. And again, maybe that's a good thing it didn't happen, that we ended up working together here at Nemo, but at the same time, the trajectory was on its way, and you made it work. So
well, that was a fun thing too, because when I think the first time we really got a chance to really sit down and chat, I had to figure out, that was another pivot moment for me, because I had been, Exit was what it was, and then I ran, again, a boutique agency for about 10 or 12 years, and it got to a point where, same thing, it's like, this could keep going the way that it is, but I don't exactly see or know how it's going to grow in bigger ways. And again, as you know, I mean, like, once you found an agency and you want to help people tell their stories, there's so much that goes into that. The business is one of it, but then it's the relationships, and also at the end of the day, the creativity that goes around it and how you produce the end result. And I got to a place where I was thinking to myself, is is this the grind I want to stick with? And it's tough without a team, especially. And we had a very small team, and so inevitably it was kind of like, well, what am I passionate about? And I kept coming back to this thing in my mind where I'll tell a story about my mom and I. I played soccer as a kid growing up in California, and one time she picked me up from soccer practice, and I was apparently staring off into the distance. And I was standing there by myself, and she comes walking up to me, and she says, "Oh, you ready to go?" And she tells me a story that I said, "That's disgusting." And she went, "What? What are you talking about?" And I said, "That." And I pointed, and she said, "You pointed at the mountains, and you couldn't see them from the smog. And you were like, that's disgusting." And she said, "Well, yeah." She's like, "Well, that's pollution, and that comes from cars and planes and other things we do to make energy and make transportation happen," whatever she said. But she's told me that story before, as I got older, and that was something that was always in my mind of like all these things I'm passionate about, whether it was action sports or cars or again just creating storytelling. In the back of my mind, I was like, we have a planet we're all here for it, and we can't just kind of keep treating it like it's an end, just endless resources. And that was always in my mind. And so as I kept working in the auto industry and other things like that, I was like, God, I'm so passionate about this stuff, but I recognize that it kind of runs contradictory to things that I also care about. And so I remember when I thought, how could I pivot this and meet new people and things like that? That's about the time that you and I met. Mm-hmm. And that's where it kind of started to blossom into this whole new direction of where I kind of started delving into automotive passion, creativity passion, but also a passion about the environment and the planet. So.
Yeah, EV cars weren't invented yet.
They were there. They just weren't
there.
Yeah, weren't terribly popular.
It wasn't that big a market for sure.
Yeah.
And then there's but that kind of segues really nicely into Chargeway.
Yeah.
And the founder's story there and how you got it started.
Well, I got to a point where, so I did try to get into the EV industry, and I thought, where could I go and forge a career in EVs? And I didn't know enough about how the EV industry was kind of how it fit together as an ecosystem. I had to learn about that. It's cars, yeah, but it's also the electric utility industry. It is also charging networks and charging hardware providers. It is policymakers, and there's all these different stakeholders that come together to make it work. And I had to figure that out beyond what the traditional auto sector was that I understood. And so I tried finding my way in the EV world, thinking like maybe I could, get a job somewhere. Like I loved, for example, at the time, Tesla was up and coming. I was like, God, it'd be great to work at a company like Tesla. Got to know a lot of folks there. But then I quickly realized that, man, companies like that, like Tesla, for example, at the time, it's like, they don't need me. They know what they're doing. Like they understand the problem, and they're building a good product ecosystem around it. So then I thought, how do I, represent to the industry and to the world that I understand this in a different way on behalf of the industries that need to pivot and change? And that was when I pretended that Chevy made an electric sports car that didn't exist, and made a website for it, sat down and thought, how do I make this look like it's real? And I sent it to a friend of mine I'd met in the industry, and they said, well, I know this isn't real, but I'll share it. And they shared it with some of their network, and next thing I knew, it went viral. And so it allowed me to set the stage for having a name, but it was all based on kind of a gimmick. But it was with the intent of saying, this is what I think Chevy should be doing.
Right.
And it really opened up a lot of doors. And all that was me just kind of with reckless abandon being like, how would I do this if I wanted to do it? And over the years, my wife has told me, she's like, it strikes me that's when you've had the most success, is when you have not worried about what others think, but you said, how would I do this? And that's when really you've had a lot of chance to shine. And that's just a little window into making a stink, but people still talk about it.
Well, you brought up something that's interesting that, again, there's a lot of young folks in the audience, and then the word that I've been hearing as a theme this year is imposter syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
And it feels like you've gotten some strategies to get past like that insecurity, we'll call it, and
Sure.
actually go through and make a mock website of what you think it can be and present it to somebody that could totally cut you down.
Oh, yeah.
And really blow out your insecurity, right? And
Yep.
so tell me more about that.
Well, that's a very real thing. I mean, I have it. I mean, there's plenty of moments I still find myself in going, am I prepared for this? Like, am I ready for this moment? I think I don't know. Again, I don't know how exactly to describe it for myself, other than I've been in moments where I will say to myself, this is just what I want to do, and I don't necessarily think of if there could be a negative result. I just think to myself, well, of course this will work. or of course this will turn out the way that I envisioned, because hey, why not? Why would it not? You know, and my brother, again, the one sibling I had, my older brother, one time, he sent me a Valentine's Day card out of nowhere, and I was always like, that's, of all the times to get a card from your older brother, but he did, and inside this card it had a magnet on it. He's like, I saw this and thought of you immediately, and said, what would you attempt to do if you knew you could not fail? It's that old quote that I forget who's even, it's an anonymous attribution. But he's like, I read that and I think, yeah, that's kind of how you operate, dude. Like, you just don't think about the concept of failure. You just kind of go, well, I'll just figure it out. And so that's part of it, I think, is and where does that come from? Like, what confidence is that? I don't even know if it's confidence as much as I just have interest. And I just think, like, the jolt exercise of pretending Chevy made that sports car, it was just kind of like, well, yeah, but they're not doing it the way that I think they should, and I don't work there, but man, I could at least show them what I think. Why not? And it was akin to, you're not building the car the way that I think you should build it. What if I modify it and show you the way that I think it would look cool? Similar concept, you know? I don't know when that happens for everybody, but, you know, it can be harder for others, so.
I think it's a big ingredient in just having, you know, just happiness.
Yeah.
And success can be varied.
Yeah.
And where the line is set, it doesn't have to be what TV is saying or internet saying, but I think it's different and unique for everybody. And I hope everybody finds that spot for themselves.
I think the happiness piece is fundamental. I have stressful days now with my work all the time. The way that I was stressed 10 years ago when I was trying to figure out how am I going to make, you know, my small agency work, or is that what I should be doing? I mean, it weighs heavy on you when you're that stressed about it. The happiness piece, I think if you're genuinely honest to yourself about what it is that does make you happy, then it changes the conversation around how stress can affect you and or how failure can affect you, is because you just kind of, you do start to treat it more like learning lessons as opposed to something that takes you down. And that's part of just being authentic around, no, this is actually what I think is me and most important. And I think I was painting a picture that I thought the world needed to see of me when I was doing my professional work 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. And the work I'm doing now, I feel that it's far more honest to what I really want to be doing, which is I get to be creative and I get to work on creative efforts through the work we do at Chargeway. Mm-hmm. But it's having an impact that will outlast me in ways that I envision it can rather outlast me. And I really love that, because it means that I'm thinking, you know, not about myself, but like, what can I contribute? So
there's a lot there. Figure out what makes you happy, that's like a whole episode in itself.
Right. I was gonna say, we're not figuring that out in 5 minutes.
Yeah, I wish I could help everybody figure what that is. And then it's a journey, not a destination.
Oh, yeah.
And then it's every time, let's call it a failure, it's just another lesson on the journey to, again, what I hear is legacy.
I think legacy is, it's an interesting thing to think of, because if you actively think about that, again, your legacy is what people decide, right? A good example is I played hockey growing up, and I'm a huge hockey fan, and there, tragically, a hockey player that the NHL lost recently, his name is Johnny Gaudreau. He played for the Calgary Flames, which was my favorite team growing up. And he was playing for the Blue Jackets in Columbus for the last couple of years. And he and his brother were out for a bike ride coming back, I think, from the reception or the rehearsal dinner for their sister's wedding that was the next day. And they were killed by a drunk driver. And, you know, Johnny, as a player, was someone I kind of I saw myself in him. When I was a kid growing up playing hockey, I was a short guy, didn't weigh much, so I had to model my game off of somebody. This guy named Theron Fleury was 5'6" and 180 pounds, played for the Flames. I was like, that guy's in the NHL. Okay, if he can do this, I can solve this. And so I modeled my playing style to him, but I became a huge Calgary Flames fan. Years pass, still a Flames fan. My wife buys me tickets to go see the Flames play on New Year's Eve in 2016, and I'd heard about Johnny Hockey, and I got a chance to see him play, and he was like 5'8", 5'9", $150. And he ended up, he was crushing it. He was great. And so I was like, hey, I can follow this guy in the same way I followed Fleury. And it's like, I see myself in him. But more so than that is what ended up happening in the last week or so was the evidence of, as an athlete on ice, his legacy will be that, but the stories that are coming out about who he was as a human and as a person and what he did for the community and how he was with his family and everything else, and the impact and the response you see from that, to me, that speaks to, again, that's someone living an authentic life that was tragically cut short, as well as his brothers. But his legacy, it's being cemented right now among fans and people that are even beyond the hockey world to say, man, this was a great person. And he was not actively thinking of trying to create that at any point, whether it was sadly now or in the future. He was just being himself. And I think that speaks to, again, the happiness thing. So.
Well, it's also seems like there's an ingredient of selflessness.
Oh, yeah.
And it's something that you've mentioned a few times in our conversation today, too. And again, it's like, and bring it back to Chargeway a bit again, it's like connecting customers to electric fuel. Mm-hmm. And again, I feel there's a passion to go beyond yourself to try to help people, navigate what will be the future, according to your dad.
He seems to be Nostradamus right now, but
he's crushing it. He's making some good predictions, and again, it seems like right now it's like you're really focusing on trying to, beyond just making a paycheck or getting the gratification of making cool design or T-shirts. It's like, hey, I'm going to educate the world on how to best navigate, let's call it the EV space, and be comfortable. We've talked in extensions at lunch on range anxiety, and that's something that your customer is dealing with. And I brought up there's definitely this again, it's a graphical solution that you guys have come up with, and I'm sure you can go into detail and explain it to our friends at home.
Yeah.
But I'm looking at right now is just sort of this color map of how and some numbers and how to help people know how to charge the vehicle.
Yeah, well, and it was all born out of my own experience. And I think that lends to the, if you're living something out personally and you feel the pain of it and then you say, I want to solve that problem. Well, that means you have a great place to jump from because you understand it, as opposed to someone's being opportunistic around something. My wife and I got our first electric car, and I convinced her that I wanted to buy it and took it on a road trip, and I screwed up the road trip. And when I called the resort we were staying and asked if they had charging, they said yes. It turned out to be an electrical outlet. And I was, like, what's going to happen now? Fortunately, it was a plug-in hybrid, so I had both gas and electric, so we had both fuels. But it was embarrassing. And it was a comment my wife made at dinner that night where she said, can I ask you a question? After the whole fiasco had played out. I was like, yeah, sure. She goes, you're a car guy, right? And I thought, yeah. And again, I joked. I was like, I thought I was. She goes, no, but seriously. She's like, you really wanted this car, and you couldn't figure this out. How would I do this? How would anyone else do this? And I do credit that moment as kind of an inception point for, how did I get this wrong? And what is wrong with, what did I get wrong? And the truth was, I was a car guy that thought of it just, well, how do I know cars? Cars you can shop for them in various modes and styles and brands and colors and everything else. The other product that we use for cars every day, none of us actively think about it because it's just waiting in the background, which is gasoline. And I thought, well, that's just kind of how I was acting with this, but it was a new fuel type. And the answer is, it's a different way of engaging with fuel. And I thought, well, then how do we make that as easy as we can? Because the cliche of it, the only constant is change. But then what do people oftentimes fear most? Change. Well, then if you combine that in the world of, what does that mean for transportation and energy moving forward? There's a lot we need to help people navigate. And so that's, the mission of Chargeway is to make that as easy for everyone, regardless of where they live, what they drive, and what their lifestyle is.
So again, imagine there's a visual in front of us, and we've got, the kiosks, mm-hmm. and you can kind of walk me through, the simplicity of, what charger do I use?
Yeah.
What's my range? Where is the charging station? Is there too many people there?
Well, everybody's got to unpack the same thing. By everybody, I mean that's industry and drivers. Is the most important thing you need to know is, number one, based on the car you're driving, is can I connect here? And that's based on the plug type. And so that's why we color code the plug types. Instead of trying to educate you on weird engineering terminology for what the plug is called or some schematic drawing, our response was visualize it. You go to green, you go to red, you go to blue. It's just, everybody can understand that, and you can translate it into multiple languages. And the visualization of that, we see it all the time in wayfinding. And so it was just designed to be simple that way. But then the other thing you need to know is how long do you got to wait? Because it's a power outlet. It's, whether it's high power, low power, mid power, whatever you want to call it. So that's why we use simple numbers to identify those power options, so you can visualize, that's a green 4. Across the street, there's a green 6. okay, if I go to the Green 6, I can fill up faster. So that was a way to translate all of that engineering that my dad and I have talked about at length over the years in a way that people could instantly visualize it based on the car they select. And so that's what our software does is you choose your car and we visualize plug type and power for your car, whether it's in a mobile app or in your car or at a kiosk at an auto dealership. So
It's so easy, even I can figure it out.
that's the idea. So
And I did remember having a conversation at another lunch, and Dave definitely gave me the confidence to get an EV.
cool.
So I ended up getting a Chevy Bolt, and then I bought another one.
Okay.
Because again, now it's like that. The early adopters are in right now in this industry. We'll call it 5. Is it 5% of sales now, or 3?
Well, annually it's getting upwards near 10.
10. Okay.
But the interesting thing is that's annual sales, but the collective automotive fleet in the United States is still at around 1.5% of being electric. So we have hundreds and millions of cars out there that need to get transitioned to electric. So the more we get into more new car sales being electric, well, obviously we will tame that, but it's going to take time. It's going to take time.
And change.
Yeah.
Because there's still a lot of things that just haven't been invented yet.
Sure.
In order to help us kind of have the confidence to totally flip over. Because I definitely go to the bowling alley and I am told how lame my electric car is because it's not a 350 diesel pickup truck.
Oh, sure. Well, and that's why brands like Ford and Chevy and others said, well, the first thing we need to go electric with is a truck. And so you had Ford with the F-150 Lightning. Chevy just recently came out with the Silverado EV. I got a chance to actually drive one the other day. I was at a charging station with my car, and I have a Tesla, and I was at a Tesla charging station, and some guy pulled up with his Chevy, and he had an adapter with him. And I'm watching this all play out, and I'm thinking, if you had Chargeway, if you look at your adapters, you would know that's not ready yet, but which we never really had that conversation. He was like, dude, this is a great app, so that was awesome. But he ended up being a longtime EV owner, and he had 600 miles on it. It was a brand new Silverado EV. And he let me look at it and check it out, and we were talking plug type and power, and he knew a lot about the engineering of it. But then he was just like, yeah, man, he's like, you want to take around the parking lot? Hop in. And so that's kind of a neat thing about EV owners is many of them are that passionate where they're like, oh, you want to check out my new car I just bought? Here, bro, go drive it, And so that was a lot of fun. But it speaks to, kind of like your point about I go to the bowling alley and they're like, yeah, you drive that little electric thing. I was staring at a beautiful giant Chevy truck that's pure electric and frankly has more range than most products on the market and can charge faster than most of the electric cars on the market. So the tech is happening, but we're still at such a very beginning stage of that, which is kind of a hard conversation to have because I think the technology industries, as we've seen them evolve quickly, it seems like it takes over fast. Even if you look back, on when cars replaced horse and buggy, it seemed to happen fast. And same thing with tech. It's like, oh, the iPhone and smartphones, it seemed to happen fast. With the electric car, I've always told people, well, you can build a car with a big battery in it, but you have to give people the confidence in the product that we haven't thought about in ages, which is the fuel. And that's what Chargeway is all about. That's where there's been this interesting dynamic playing out now of like the auto sector finally figured things out, but the energy sector is still trying to figure out how do we have this conversation with the public. And that's a big part of what we try to solve. So.
That's this headline here too. Again, it's got Inside EV Magazine. And again, it says U.S. will have more EV fast charging gas stations in less than a decade.
Yeah.
And so, is this happening? Is this real?
Yeah, it is happening. And that's the thing that's so interesting is one thing I tell people all the time about, and this gets into the marketing and branding of what we're doing in the electric car industry, is we see automotive ads all the time. You never see any advertising for electricity as a fuel, ever. I mean, I tell people jokingly, I'm like here in Portland, I'm like, go to a Timbers game. If you're standing in the Army and you look across the field, what's one of the things you see? A big orange ball with a blue 76 on it. It's this like reinforcement constantly of like gas is around, and we just don't think of that on behalf of electric cars being that, oh yeah, you got to tell people about that too with electricity. So these stations are coming in, but the problem is there's just no discussion about the visibility of it in a way that there's a narrative to tell people that this is a product that you should also be thinking about. Next time you go car shopping, you could be thinking like, oh, electric fuel is a thing. And I can fill up an electric car in as little as 15 minutes, or I could fill it up at home for $5 and it'll be a full charge overnight. Like these are narratives that are oftentimes talked about in the electric car world, but we're not putting together a sound, creative, and effective communication and marketing strategy to help people understand that how that benefits the electric car purchase. It's just not there yet.
Well, even to Elon Musk's credit, he knew that had to be solved and started building those.
From the network side?
The network side.
I mean, yeah, full credit to Tesla. And the people that were at Tesla working alongside Musk, like JB Straubel, who was their CTO for years, I mean, he really was a lot of the brain trust behind the ecosystem that Tesla inevitably deployed, which includes Tesla Energy for home solar and home batteries, the supercharger network. People like JB Straubel were instrumental in that. And then the engineers that are still there to this day, they keep improving upon all of that, right? So there's so mese people that are like unsung heroes in the EV world. I think that oftentimes, I mean, Musk gets a lot of the attention, and to his credit, he had the balls to take on all this stuff. And then then you still have to talk about things like SpaceX and other things like that, where he's making a huge difference. But it's happening. It is happening, and Tesla certainly led the way on understanding how the ecosystem had to work to make the user experience easy.
And it's there. And with that too, again, is like, where's Chargeway going?
Well, I think my vision was always, how fast can we put our solution into the hands of the public so that they can have it at their disposal and understand how to make the transition into using cleaner energy in a way that they can be casually confident. That was our goal with the idea of the product as software, but also just the design of the language and the visualizations and the ecosystem of it. But it's not just the drivers, it's also what entities can we partner with that are invested into making a difference into this conversation. So that's why we've been working with a lot of electric utility companies around the US that are proactive on this, that realize the role they play in people that own electric cars and programs they have around that. But that's also, it's kind of like turning the Titanic, right? You've got a 100-year-old company that all they've ever done is like, hey, we keep the lights on. And that's hard. It is very hard. But then they say things like, well, when air conditioners came out, that was a big challenge, but we solved it. But it took some time. Same thing with this. It's where, and also, companies like that, they're very conservative. I mean, they are publicly regulated. They can't exactly go out and just be creative for creative's sake. They've got a lot of check boxes they got to go by. So it's also kind of trying to break through some bureaucracy around that. And as a small entity that can be nimble and creative, we offer an outlet for that. So I think we were early in identifying with the problem, but I think our being early gave us some time to really build up a lot of good data, but also improve our product and improve our strategy. That our timing's great. So what does that mean for us moving forward? There's some opportunity, I think, to work with some pretty big entities that have very big megaphones that need our solution. That's what we're working toward. So
Awesome.
I mean, so sky's the limit kind of thing. We'll see what happens. I'm excited as hell. It's very rewarding to work on something that, like we were talking at the beginning, is like, this could have an impact in a long-lasting way on society and people's lives that I will never meet. But I'll at least know that, when I'm 80, 90, however old I live to, I can say, I tried. Like, I really tried to be a part of putting my talents to good use in a way that, what did it result in? Made people's lives better.
It just brings up that other hockey quote from another great hockey player.
I think I know where this is.
Go ahead.
Skate to where the puck is going.
Skate to where the puck's going.
Good old Wayne, But and it's funny is, like, again, thinking back, like when I first thought of Chargeway, it was born out of an experience I had. I'm like, how did I get this wrong? And then my wife asking me a question. I'm thinking, like, is that really how this is? And then going and really doing some research against it. And because of my background in automotive and in branding and in marketing and communications and advertising, looking at it thinking, we cannot hand the public this type of message and product and say, cool, go do this. This is, just become an engineer and you'll figure it out. When the incumbent product is called regular and it's a liquid and it's on every street corner and they never have to think harder than that. It's just like, we got to solve that. So
that range anxiety is still, I think, an issue. It's like 5 minutes to gas up and it's still 15 minutes with a supercharger if you're lucky. Mm-hmm. And so I say somebody's inventing something as we speak. It's going to happen.
We're seeing, out of China, some of the technology they're showcasing is bonkers. Super high powered charging. They're able to say, we can fill you up to 80% in less than 10 minutes on a battery pack. And the thing that I always think of is, it's true, they're doing that. They're showcasing they can do it with the technology that they have. but you still have to produce that power. How are we going to produce enough power to put to these charging stations to fill up a car in, less
5
than
minutes.
Yeah.
'Cause
And
we're
again,
only- you're saying we're at 10% with the vehicles on the road today.
yeah.
And if it could get it even up to 50%, how much juice is that going to take and require?
Well, the way that I think of it, though, is this gets back to again, we're talking about lifestyle change. Is we're conditioned. We think that a fill up in your car is supposed to take 5 minutes or less. You go in and grab your Slurpee and you're on your way or whatever. Like, that's what we're conditioned to think that. But I've been driving electric cars for over 10 years, and if you're a homeowner, you honestly don't think of it that way.
True.
You basically just say, okay, on a road trip, I do need to have that fast fill up if I'm going to drive. Like, my family lives in Spokane. If I want to go see my family, I need to have some fast charging along the way. It's there, and I use it, but I don't use it more than maybe a handful of times a year at best. So from a lifestyle perspective, most EV owners that are homeowners, the idea of I got to have a fast charge is less than 1% of your driving experience. Every other time, it's like, yeah, my car literally just fills up in the background at home.
Yeah, just like your phone or your laptop.
You're not thinking about it because your car is just dwelling. But it's always that 0.001% use case of people saying, like, but my car has to do this, this, and that. Zombie apocalypse, you name it,
Yeah.
So I get it, but it is a lifestyle element that is going to have to be learned, but also providing people visibility into how it works is what.
Well, you brought up China, and we know that they have some superior product, and we know these tariffs are being thrown to kind of, help U.S. manufacturers. Do you have any insights there?
Well, I'm not a huge fan of what's happening there. Namely, if you look at the news even this week, is a lot of automakers are pulling back on their commitments for electric car development. Right. We heard things like all electric by 2030, but from certain brands, and they're all deciding, we're going to take a step back. And my response to that is, okay, what's happening? Well, they're seeing what they consider as a softening of demand. The curve is not a hockey stick curve. It's just kind of still progressing up, but it's not the aggressive curve that they thought was coming. And they were so reactive in making these announcements and saying they were going to do this with their lineups and developing that technology. Because they were reactive, they didn't even also know what they needed to be building. And a good example of that is when Ford went all in saying we're going to produce all these vehicles, and then the CEO finally announces, he's like, I was on a road trip and it was just a gigantic pain in the ass. And my kids kept saying, yeah, Dad, well, look at those Tesla stations. They're everywhere, and those guys seem to be happy. Why can't we do that? And it was just, and he's like, I had this aha moment of like, man, we should just tap into that somehow. And I'm looking at this thinking, you just had that aha moment? How many billions of dollars are you guys into this? and so that's the part where, again, the brain trust of somewhere like a Tesla, where they were already thinking differently, we are deconditioning and decoding the strategic understanding of what product ecosystems have existed in automotive and energy for the last century. And we're seeing it happen in real time, and billions are being spent. So it's not a perfect process. But because of all that, to the point about the tariffs, that concerns me. I feel like we're not showing the American public the type of products that are out there that they could be wowed by. At the same time, we're shielding domestic manufacturers from having to actually compete.
Invent.
Yeah, they don't have to be innovative. Like, we went to the fucking moon. We go to space. like in the U.S., like we've set the standard for so many things, innovation related and risk taking related and just courage related, and we are not doing that right now in the realm of technology and business. And I for one, I think that's a terrible strategy. You can only hide so long from what's happening outside of your borders. We don't live in it is look at the technology we have today for communication. People will figure out that they are getting the short end of the stick on vehicle options in the United States. I mean, that's just going to happen. So, but we can only hide for so long.
So the lesson there: innovate or die.
Adapt or die. I mean, right? It's just what was that? Yeah, that from Moneyball when he was like adapt or die. Kind of like you're changing the entire team format here. He's like, yeah, I know. So what? And I think that we've created a situation here in the United States where we're all very comfortable in many ways. There's things that, sure, we have discomforts and things that aren't great for day-to-day life here in the U.S., but in a grand scale for industry, technology, things of that nature, we've been leaders for a long time. But we are, people aren't nipping at our heels right now. They are passing us. And that's where I look at it and think, okay, no, don't pull back right now and say, oh yeah, demand is soft on EVs, and my response to that is, well, out of curiosity, why would anybody rush into a dealership to buy a car that runs on a fuel they don't understand or even know about? Why would they do that? The answer is they won't. We're relying on them to self-educate like all the early adopters did, and that's not how the mass market works. You have to be very clear about the product. You have to be very clear about the benefit, and we aren't doing that right now. And it's like, okay, I've been saying that for almost 10 years. I feel like I'm running for office and there's no election day. It's terrible. But it's like, it's still a problem. Like, the messaging matters. It's two products, car and fuel. And we are now watching our domestic industry kind of go, oh, well, we'll soften this a bit. Maybe we'll do hybrids, and maybe we'll talk hydrogen again. And I'm just like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. It's like, I can't produce hydrogen at home. Sorry. I can fill it for $5 with my car.
Yeah, it's cheap.
Yeah, it's like, sorry, I don't need to find out how the next massive corporations be like, you want to come to our hydrogen station? No, I don't.
All those moving parts that need to be fixed.
Right.
Sign up now.
Exactly, yeah. So, I mean, so what does the future hold? Where's all this heading? I mean, there's a lot of volatility to it. I'm hopeful that here in the U.S. we will be, again, focusing on the idea that we do need to compete. And we need narrative and leadership that understand that reality, whether that's political or from a business perspective. So,
and with a couple of closing thoughts too, because what's the definition of branding?
Well, I mean, you go for the textbook version, the dictionary definition. I mean, I always look from a brand. If I'm defining brand, I would say it is your image, the visual image that people understand of who you are, but also their emotional attachment to who you are, in the sense that they understand what you stand for. Without that, you're just a logo. So that's my take. What's your take, frankly? I mean, you've been doing this a long time.
The simple part, again, is on the T-shirt. It says it's not what you say, it's what they say. Mm-hmm. Because it still lies in what the consumer's perception is of your brand. And really the story that they share at dinner about your brand. Because as much as we look at Super Bowl ads and think that we can spend our way into success as a company, it's really done at the dinner table with word-of-mouth conversations. Yep. And I think that's why people trust influencers, or even in our world of sports athletes, because they're authentic and they're genuine. And that's sort of that's a marketing strategy. Yeah. But they're telling and representing your brand. Yep. Jordan's always been a great representation for the Nike brand historically, and those stories will continue because people want to hear stories. And I think brands can be the purveyors of great stories. I mean, Patagonia's done an amazing job as a brand. What are your favorite brands?
I would have said Tesla a year or two ago, but
Tell me more.
Tesla, I think, has a very big brand problem right now. And it's unfortunate. I mean, they have a CEO who was a visionary leader that many people were gravitating to and fell in love with because of what he said his mission was for the company and what they were building as a product. But brand can also become so tightly associated with an individual human. I mean, whether that's a CEO or whether that's a product brand, for consumer product like Jordan or something else, right? Is people then they equate that. I mean, like, look at the challenges that brands have, like Tiger Woods, like the challenge that existed there in his career. He had to reimagine who he was as a brand based on who he was and how he'd acted, right? And then the companies that are associated with that, how do they respond? So, I mean, favorite brands right now, some big stuff, some small stuff. There's little guys. I mean, they're not even little. I mean, but they're just probably unknown to most people. There's a company called Span that is really cool that I like. What they produce is a smart electrical panel for your house, and it's just a reimagining of a product that has been the same forever. And it was born out of some guys that did work at Tesla, that were working in Tesla Energy, and they looked at it and said, yeah, the one hang-up we have when we're installing stuff at houses is this archaic breaker box. It's always a pain point. It's terrible. And they saw a problem, and that's an opportunity. And what can we do to make that better? And I haven't got a chance to meet the team that founded the company, but I met people that work there and how they talk about it. And I just think they have an elegant product. I think that how they branded it was really simple, and I like it. I think they've done some really good stuff. Outside of that, I don't know. It's funny. I'm not becoming, I hope I'm not becoming cynical, but like I look at certain stuff and I'm always kind of like, where's the authenticity in this? You know, sometimes it feels so often anymore. It feels forced. Even with influencers, for example, it's like you can sniff right through it. It's just like, yeah. You used to be someone who was a human and authentic, and now I can totally tell that this was paid for and sponsored by, like chicken fries from Burger King or something. And you're just kind of like, okay, you know. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge right now is that I think up and coming generations, and something I said to GM long ago. I think I might have still been a teenager. I was in a focus group with them, and they were showing me renderings of some stuff they were working on. And they said, okay, we really want to get your feedback. And then look at what we did this. And they were really trying to like kind of pump me up with something. And I said, can I just be honest with you? I'm going to tell you what is cool. You are not going to tell me what is cool. And they were like, oh, okay. So it was like this millennial moment. I'm like kind of like very like, I refer to myself as Gen X just because I'm like, I have an older brother. He's Gen X. I'm like, that's where I live. But I'm like on this weird cusp of like, that was like a millennial moment of like, I don't know how to tell you this, but you're not the one to tell me this is cool. And I think that's the biggest challenge for brands moving forward is truly capturing authenticity. But as you describe, it is that conversation around the dinner table of people just saying, it's you can tell when it's effortless. When someone's like, I just love what they do. Mm-hmm. They don't even try that hard. It's just really cool, you know, and full circle, it's like, you know, that's where I was like responding to Tesla like long ago. I was like, man, I'm a believer in this brand. I think that, yeah, they have a brand, you know, challenge on their hands that they become as a brand so intertwined with a CEO who's become a lightning rod for a lot of reasons. They're going to have to navigate that. And unfortunately, their CEO has been one to say, I don't think about marketing ever. Like, I don't care about branding or marketing or advertising. I don't care. Well, when all of a sudden the board has to sit down and say, hey, we got to sell cars. Like, that conversation will change, you know, and, you know, but that's just, again, like an example of companies growing quickly and people gaining power and notoriety. And it's like, well, when those things blend, yeah, it can become challenging. So,
I love it. What can you take us out with?
Oh.
What are you doing next?
What am I doing next? I got to be honest, if I love the fact that I get to do something that I'm passionate about every day, but I have a lot of other passions. I mean, like, dude, the fact that like you picked up on this is it. And one of the things that I've always just dabbled with, and I have a cousin who's a phenomenal photographer. I think you guys have you've done work with Tony. I think, and I've always loved seeing how he was able to translate that into something where it's like if you can capture moments in a way that people, again, still photography for me. Again, you can watch anything like any TikTok or anything else in the world, but like there's something about capturing a moment like that is special. And I have moments where I wish I had more like prowess and capability in how to capture certain situations. I was on a trip recently where I had the opportunity. We were, you know, my wife and I were traveling, and it was somewhere where there was low light, no clouds, and I was sitting looking up, and with the naked eye, you could see the Milky Way. And I was like, okay. And where I was sitting, there was light, artificial light. And I was like, if I go out in the middle of nowhere, I'm like, what's this going to be? I walked out to a path that was like in the middle of nowhere where we were. And I sat down, and I made a point to just kind of tilt my head back. And I finally laid down on this path on my back and just sat there. And I was like, man, I wish I had the right equipment right now. So I pull out my phone, and I'm just kind of like, click, you know, and just like trying to do it. And amazingly enough, it actually, I got some pretty decent stuff. Like, you know, I would love to get more into capturing moments like that. It'd be a lot of fun.
I'll send you a guy. He's amazing at doing it. And the sensors on the new gear is just, it's right there.
That's the part is then it's like a rabbit hole of like, oh, new hobby.
Just what you need.
Exactly.
I'm sure you're smart enough to figure out how to do it.
Well, yeah, that I want. I got to get my wife got me a telescope like a couple years ago as a gift, and she knew how much I talked about my mom had one when I was a kid. And I remember the first time I saw Saturn, and my mom had like that OG like long slender telescope, and she's like, okay, watch it for 2 seconds, and I got to move it again because that thing's cruising, you know. And so like we're like going along and tracking it, and so my wife got me a new telescope, and I've gone out a few times. It's in front of my house, like. I'll just be like looking at the moon or something. And one time there was Jupiter's moons were lined up kind of right with it. And it was so close to us that through a basic telescope, you could see literally Jupiter and like 4 of its moons like lined up. And I'm out front just in front of my house again, this is like in a neighborhood here in Portland. And these two girls were just like walking home. They're like, "What are you looking at?" I was like, "Oh, Jupiter. You can see its moon." So they're like, "What?" I said, "Yeah." And so if you guys want to take a look, they're like, "Yeah, actually." And then they got into like, "Oh my God," and it's little moments like that. It's like, yeah, you don't know. Yep. If you don't, I mean, again, I follow this stuff, and because I'm a geek about some of it, but capturing those types of moments and then resharing it with people, I think I would imagine the photographers like people like Chris Burkhardt.
That guy, he's pretty good.
Oh my gosh, he did that documentary about surfing in Iceland.
Yep.
And we went and saw that, and he was there and met with people afterward, and I got one of his signed posters, and I was like, dude, this is one of the coolest things I've ever seen anybody capture on anything, And so it's that type of stuff. I would love to do that if I could. So I don't know.
We'll take you out.
Yeah.
Let's go.
I was gonna say, you guys know how to do that. Can't you guys help me do that?
Every day. Yeah, that's what we do here for sure. And if we can do it, you can do it.
Hopefully, yeah.
Perfect. I'm glad you got some time for us today. And
dude, thanks for the invite.
I know you're in between vacations because life's so hard. But
well.
And thanks for getting in.
I appreciate it. No, honestly, I always enjoy the chance to chat with you. It's again, kindred spirits in a lot of ways, and I get a kick out of it. And I appreciate that. What we're doing with Chargeway and what my vision is for that is something that you see a lot of importance in for where we're going. As a as a community in Portland or beyond. So I appreciate the time for that.
Well, I'm hoping you're going to solve this nuclear power thing. So
Gates was on top of that for a while, I thought, and then COVID hit. I don't know.
COVID.
Yeah, always COVID.
Trust it. Thank you.